Hello, everybody out there in comic book land. My name is George Serrano, aka The Don, and we must have been doing something good because you guys are back for the second issue of the Major Issues podcast, where we tackle all the greatest and latest things to come to comic books and comic book media. And just like last time, I am being joined by a resident comic book clicker, one of the newest members to the click. Sir, introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Jonathan Escudero, aka Yogi, like the bear, because I'm so hairy and because my eyes are always low.
There you go, Yogi like the bear, and we're gonna be doing something we haven't done in a long time, something that actually needs to be done here at CBC. We're gonna actually delve into some comics, some comic news. We'll talk about Doomsday Clock, get into all things Dark Knight's Metal, and finally get to talk about these stories that will probably eventually be made into films that we're all gonna end up having to see. So I guess we just go right in. Well, spoilers. If you haven't read any of this stuff, there's going to be tons of spoilers to deal with. The Doomsday Clock and the Dark Knight's Metal series, which you still have time to jump in on both of them. Doomsday Clock is only on issue 1. The Dark Knight's Metal is on issue 3, I believe, out of 8.
4 comes out in December.
Yeah, so we still got a lot of time. But as far as a recap and review, we can do all that here for you guys. Look at that. Free of charge.
So convenient.
So nice. Free of charge. We'll do that right here for you. We'll go ahead and get into Doomsday Clock first, but before we do that, how did you feel about the idea of comic book sequels in general? Because it's a trepidatious situation when a creator has their stuff remade, and sometimes it's even worse when that creator has their stuff remade and they're not the ones to remake it.
You see, that I have my own ideas on that, where superheroes are basically stories that are built off of characters that were created by someone else. So if you create characters in the comic book industry, you almost have to expect that someone else is going to take your baton and keep running with it.
That's true.
I mean, I love Alan Moore, and we all know how he feels about that, but I've always disagreed with him.
Oh, he does. I mean, isn't he notorious for saying, like, anybody who adapts any of his stuff that's not his?
He hates it. It's not the way his story was envisioned. He doesn't want people touching characters that he plays with, although he made his career on playing with characters that other people
check that out, right?
So yeah,
I mean, who would have known had they let him use the Charlton characters that he wanted to, because initially he wanted to base Watchmen off the Charlton characters that DC had purchased.
Oh, but they would have never been usable again.
No. Yeah, because when the question goes around saying that when the horrors of this city ask me for help, I will say no. Like, you're like, damn, the question, what's going on there? When I first heard about this crossover or this super event, first thing that came to mind was Zack Snyder directed Watchmen. Zack Snyder directed Justice League. They're creating a property, Zack Snyder friendly to make into a movie. Now, obviously, a lot more thought went into that than that. But do you think I'm crazy? Do you think that there's any kind of allegiance there? Or was just Watchmen just primed for a sequel?
I think it's actually a bit of a mixture of all the things you said there. I see it as how HBO is actually working on that new Watchmen series right now, and this book would be done around the time that Watchmen would be premiering on HBO. So there's definitely some type of corporate synergy going on there. But it's not like these. You see, you were saying how do I feel about comic book sequels? Like, if there is a story to be told, and it sequelizes an older story that people are like really protective of, that's fine. But if we're going to, try to mine a property just for money, in the way that they did with Before Watchmen.
I was going to bring that up as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people were not happy that the Before Watchmen series came out. They said that those stories didn't need to be told and kind of just stretched out or diluted the Watchmen legend. And Watchmen, currently, the only comic book on the Time Magazine's 100 novels to read.
Yes, it is.
And that's big, so you got to think that they're trying to strike. It's not while the iron's hot, because the movie came out about almost 10 years ago at this point.
Cold.
yes, the iron is pretty cool, but they struck, and man, issue 1 of 12 issues is definitely a setup, as it's intended to be. This is not something that you're gonna get exactly what you want out of every issue, but the pieces will lock in when they need to. And we start off right from basically, years after the big lie has been figured out. Ozymandias has been found out. And you know what? As soon as I read all that stuff, I kind of laughed to myself. Because in my mind, this happened, although it happened a short time after, he expected this thing to like work.
He
Like
did
this was gonna like, oh, open and shut case.
This
Doctor
was
Manhattan did it.
supposed to be the beginning of his utopia.
Yeah,
No.
Doctor Manhattan did it, and we're all good. And he turned the first page of Doomsday Clock, and there's riots in the street.
But as he figured out, there was one major flaw in his plan. God abandoned them all.
They did, and so you go right back into the 9-panel structure of the Watchmen, which, what a nice little hug.
Gary Frank absolutely killed this issue. Like, if you've read some of his past work, this Doomsday Clock is so much more detailed, and he was trying to go for that Brian Boland side, but he nailed it. It's beautiful. This is beautiful work.
And all of the dialogue that's written on it, I mean, it's cliche to say that it fits like a glove with what Watchmen has created, but that's exactly what it is. I mean, this is when you want a sequel, or you want something to continue the story. This is kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for something in the same vein, but something that's going to add to the mythology. And the mythology that we're at now is a world in which we're back at war again. We're back at everyone trying to nuke each other. We're back at morality across the world going down, and Ozymandias being seen as the fraud as he is, and he's actually hiding out. They can't find Ozymandias.
Yeah.
And
people are paranoid around the world. They think the governments might have been colluding with Ozymandias. Nobody trusts each other anymore.
It's out of control, and then we get the shocker that Ozymandias has a tumor in his brain.
Yes. It would be ironic if he did get it from Dr. Manhattan the way he was telling
Oh, right. Well, the way he told everybody that, and man, the smartest man in the world, seemingly now, with a doomsday clock on him. He now, time is of the essence, and we're still at least trying to find them. But we are able to find that not everything is as it seems, because Rorschach is back.
Rorschach is back, or at least it appears so.
Yes, and how do you feel about Rorschach being back? I mean, one of these panels was teased for a very long time about, like, look at Rorschach in this prison.
So for those who don't know, Jeff Johns actually premiered six pages, the first 6 pages of Doomsday Clock back at New York City Comic Con, and the big reveal at the end of the 6 pages was that Rorschach is alive and still doing what he does.
You were there for that. How did people react to the idea that Rorschach, on the face of it, the Rorschach that we know is alive?
The initial shock of it was pretty nuts. The room did go a little crazy.
As it would. I mean, one of the pinnacle scenes of that comic or the film is the death of Rorschach, because he will not compromise in the face of Armageddon. But not much time goes by in the comic before we find out that Rorschach may not be who he says he is.
And I think it's great that you mentioned that he dies because he will not compromise, because one of the first things we see this Rorschach do is compromise.
Right. Very unlike
our Rorschach.
So what do you think this... I mean, obviously it's way too early to tell, but do you think this is a cosplay idea? Is this somebody... is this somebody who's so inspired by Rorschach that he feels that he needs to go and do it? Is this the guy who picked up the notebook?
Actually, if you read the extra texts in the back of the book, you find out that the dude Seymour, the journalist who picked up Rorschach's journal at the end of Watchmen, was actually killed.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and he got his journal stolen. So
that's floating around. The truth of everything,
yes,
is floating around, and that's quite dangerous. But that's why I guess you got to amass a team, and who better to, I guess, be on your team than Rorschach, even if he's not the real one, I guess. Rorschach goes ahead to try to recruit the marionette and the mime, two new characters. How did you feel about these inclusion of 2 new characters to the Watchmen mythos? I'm guessing that someone's going to have to take the place of some of the lost characters of Watchmen.
Well, actually, you see, I thought this was another example of Jeff Johns' beautiful, beautiful fanboyism coming to light here, where the original Watchmen was all characters based off of the Charlton characters that DC had just bought.
This is true.
So now Jeff Johns has added 2 new characters into the Watchmen mythos that are also based off of Charlton characters.
Oh, wow.
From back in the day. They're based off of Punch and Jewel, another married couple. See, you got Marionette and Mime here.
Right.
A married couple here, but they're a little bit darker and
murderous. Oh, the whole thing about we have to go get Mime and we have to go get Mime's weapons. Is hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. Like watching him load his fake, or not his fake. I'm sorry, Mime. His invisible. watching him load his invisible guns into his holster and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Absolutely hilarious. But when push comes to shove and he gets into a prison fight, Mime lets people know that he's not one to be trifled with.
Now, one of the things we actually should mention before we keep moving is that you see, the Rorschach was actually Rorschach actually broke into the prison that the original Rorschach was broken out of, or back in the day by Night Owl and Silk Spectre, and he broke into this prison just to liberate Marionette, who says, I'm not going anywhere without my husband. So this was actually the first clue that we get that this might not be Rorschach, because now we've got this dude Mime, who has I want to say there's this panel here, and if you've read the book, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where Mime first gets released from his cell. He attacks everyone who is harassing him, and he's got just blood smeared across his face with a smile, very reminiscent of one Joker.
Yeah. And that blood stays there. It's a conscious effort to keep that blood on his mouth like that. And very much like the mimes. You remember how they used to outline the big mouths on the mimes? So that does a lot to paint a very kind of sadistic picture of this couple and how one of them just does not care about
now, you see, this couple actually
being sadistic.
This couple actually does have a child, which is what Rorschach was using as leverage.
Right, they have a son.
One of the prevailing theories online being that their child is a bit older than we've seen in their photos, is that Mime and Marionette might actually be the parents of one of DC's 3 Jokers.
That actually would make a lot of sense. And mimes and marionettes go right into that whole theatrics of clowns and stuff like that. I like the hints. The hints are there.
And it's definitely Jeff Johns' story that he's still telling from back in Rebirth, where this was first revealed. So
Also, way too early to tell, but do you think the Joker makes an appearance in this Doomsday Clock?
He's actually on the alternate cover of issue 5.
Oh wow! Yeah. I saw Lex. Lex is coming.
Lex is there. We've got another cover with Batman reading Rorschach's journal.
Right, which is out of control. He's like, this guy's crazy. Look at him, so brooding and dark.
I love this story.
Hilarious. But continuing on. He gets my marionette. Like I said, he does the ridiculousness of loading up his fake guns into his holster.
Oh, it's just...
And just the way they play it, like with these panels, they still, even though there's so much on the page, they still let each panel breathe, and you still get to see the progression of how things get shot like a movie. I mean, a lot of people said that Zack Snyder did a great job with Watchmen, but Watchmen was basically storyboarded. They have everything you've ever needed on the comic page, very similar to here. But before they know where they're going, Rorschach says, "Don't worry about it. I'm taking you." And we find out that Rorschach, or at least this Rorschach, is working for Ozymandias.
Yes, he is, and they're based out of Night Owl's old cave.
Night Owl 2, his little basement headquarters.
Yeah, there you go.
Is being repurposed as Ozymandias' I guess lair at the moment, and Ozymandias confesses that he does have a brain tumor, and is not going to be long for this earth, and then says that he will help Marionette and Mime find their child, as long as he gets to find one of his homeboys, his OG homeboy.
We're going to find God.
Yeah, we need to find God, because God has left us, people. That's why this Doomsday Clock is happening. That's why the world is on the brink of destruction.
Dr. Manhattan, for those who...
We need to find Dr. Manhattan.
Yes.
And
actually, we neglected to mention, and that's because we here at Comic Book Click don't particularly care about race. But we neglected to mention that Rorschach was asked to prove himself, and he proved that he was not the original Rorschach by taking off a single glove and showing a hand with dark skin.
Yes,
this is an African American man.
This is a dark-skinned Rorschach. Do you think that plays into this, or was this just a quick way to get people to stop asking questions?
I think, Jeff Johns was specific about he wanted it to be a diverse story. So Mime and Marionette are of Hispanic descent, and this Rorschach is a dark-skinned man. And so that was on purpose. But at the same time, we've got characters from the original Watchmen story.
Right.
Who now gives us a clue about. You remember Rorschach's therapist, Malcolm.
Yes.
Who went a little crazy, and we never actually got a confirmation about whether or not he was killed in the New York attacks.
Wow, that actually could that could be the foundation for all this, because I mean, you live your life trying to convince people that they may not be seeing things the way that they think that they are, and then you find out that that's exactly how it went down. Once Rorschach's a big lie, he exposes the big lie. That could motivate somebody to maybe sort of kind of start fighting crime and pick up somebody's mantle and start trying to kill them.
Definitely can.
But I love that Ozymandias still has his like weird pets, like his weird, like
he's got a new bit. He's got a new one because he killed his
exploded.
He killed it with Dr. Manhattan, so he's got a little kitten version of it.
Like I like to think that he ran out of his like Antarctic lair with this cat of somehow, and then got all the way to where Night Owl lives, and it's fine. He seems very positive for somebody who's dying.
Definitely does.
And also very positive for somebody who's being sought after, like, by every government out. So I don't know if that is just Ozymandias being Ozymandias in the sense that he thinks he has it all under control and undercover, or if it's all a facade.
There's another interesting thing actually about Ozymandias and what's going on right now. The way they're talking, it's like it's been 7 years since the end of Watchmen. It's what is it, November 22nd or the 23rd?
Yeah, I can't remember.
1992, but that might not be that their timeline might not actually be moving at the same rate as the DC Universe's timeline. It can be 2017 in the DC Universe while being 1992.
That's true.
In the Watchmen universe, so like that's actually another thing that I'm looking for in this story. Has Dr. Manhattan been messing with the DC universe for the last 30 years, or is the Watchmen timeline moving differently than the DC universe's timeline?
I was also thinking about that too, because that's been the long time speculation. I mean, people know that Dr. Manhattan has had an effect on the DC timeline, and you hear at the end of Watchmen that he says if he ever gets bored, right, he'll just create life, or he'll just the thought that he got bored and decided to play with our favorite heroes, heroes that are 80 years old, have been ingrained in our memories. The fact that he's just playing around with these guys like ants, which is something that's it's a play in the entire Watchmen series, right? The idea that people are being puppets and not realizing it.
Yes.
Now you have some of the greatest heroes of our generation as puppets, with Dr. Manhattan holding the strings, and that I want to think that it could be a case of him doing it and not realizing how malicious it is. Because once we talk all the time about his humanity.
Yes.
Dr. Manhattan's humanity, and when you're a kid and you're pulling off legs on a spider, you're not really thinking of the agony that, you're curious. You're just playing around.
You just want to see what happens.
Right. So, hopefully we get some of that humanity. We get to find out, where he's at in the scope of this story, where his humanity is, and we get to find out a definitive answer as to what he wanted to do or what he was trying to do with the DC universe.
One of the quotes that Jeff Johns uses towards the end of Doomsday Clock is from the poem with Ozymandias,
right?
But not the more famous poem. It's actually a poem written by the friend of the person who wrote the more famous Ozymandias poem.
So basically, it was the Doomsday Clock of the Ozymandias poem.
Well, the book that they got that quote from was actually about like what would happen, how a person's behavior is affected when you give them positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement,
right?
And to see what happens. Like, so a lot of people were thinking like that plays into how he's using Dr. Manhattan in the story here, where he's been maybe messing with the DC universe for 30 years and not maliciously, like you were saying. Well, where he's maybe just doing things just to, let's see what happens if I kill this guy. Or let's see what happens.
Bring boy. I don't want Superman to not have his dad. Let's bring that back. Let's see how the world works with that.
As one of the next things that happens in the story is we go from this actually quite refreshing dip in the Watchmen pool, as I would want to say. We go from the Watchmen world over to the DC universe. Another cool artistic thing about this switchover was the tone of the whole book. When we're in the Watchmen world, you've got this orangey, yellowy tone to it. But when we move over to DC universe, now we've got this cool blue. We're completely in another universe, and you can see it in the art. It's just
and to speak on the color palette of the Watchmen universe, there's a lot of themes going on. With the riots, you have literally streets being set ablaze, and you're getting that orange glow of the fires of the riots of unhappy citizens in the Watchmen universe. Also, there are multiple countries threatening to send nuclear arms, and it's almost like the entire panels of the Watchmen version of this comic are glowing with that radiation, that sort of a nuclear time that's going on here. So now we go to the DC universe, and for the most part, yeah, our guys are kind of chilling, right? Like our Earth are not, in comparison, our Earth is not on the brink of nuclear destruction. As a matter of fact, Superman is just hanging out, sleeping in his house with Lois.
He's sleeping in the house with Lois, and I actually want to apologize because what I was saying about that story where the people were affected by positive and negative reinforcement doesn't come from the Ozymandias quote. That comes from the book that Superman was reading before he went to sleep.
Which would then put those ideas in his head.
Yes.
Which makes a lot of sense.
As we see now, Superman is actually having a nightmare.
A nightmare for the first time ever. And it brings him back to, I guess, like, younger age Superman.
Yeah, the day his parents died in a car accident. And New 52 continuity, it was an imp from the fifth dimension that had something to do with this car crash. But
yes, it was.
What we're looking at here might be saying that it wasn't. It might have been Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan.
There you go. Yeah.
Messing with the DC's reality here. Because that's actually the end of the book. The book ends on Superman having a nightmare, waking up and saying, holy shit, Lois, I had a nightmare. She's like, don't worry about it. He's like, no, I don't have nightmares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he does it. And you got to think, like, if something is spooking the Man of Steel, if something is spooking a guy of this power who basically at this point has seen and done everything.
Yes.
Everything. He's faced demons, he's faced gods, he's faced imps from the fifth dimension. And now his own mind is seemingly fighting him in this nightmare sequence. And, if you go from that to what happens in Action Comics a little bit without spoiling too much, he doesn't know what's right and wrong anymore. He doesn't know what the truth is about things anymore. And now his dreams are kind of betraying him. That's gonna serve to be a big part of the narrative for Superman. What can he trust? What does he know? What is coming? Is everybody right who's been telling him for the longest time? I mean, we've seen this across DC Rebirth, right? Something's coming. We got to get ready. Something's coming.
Handle it. They've been told no one can handle this threat.
To the point that his dad was going to pick him up and take him home.
There you go.
I mean, how big of a fight does it have to be for that to happen? But it ends with, like you said, with the quote from Ozymandias. He meets some fragments huge and stops to guess what powerful but unrecorded race once dwelt in the annihilated place.
The title of the story, by the way, The Annihilated Place.
And you got, the annihilated place obviously signifies the Watchmen universe, yes. But they were a powerful, maybe not race, but set of characters, and I don't think they're gone. They might be making their way over to the DC universe, which...
Well, they have to find God, and if everything is the way it's looked, he's here in the DC universe, messing around, just, plucking around.
We also got to believe that that Dr. Manhattan understands the concept of the multiverse. That he understands the concept of the time stream, the Speed Force, right? Like all these big ideas that happen with DC, to have somebody almost know all of that. We really get to see what the limitations of John will be in this, because we don't know what side he's on. We don't know how he feels about all this. Is he gonna just be like? Is Ozymandias' goal to just get his brain tumor out? Is he working for selfish reasons?
You've got to figure he doesn't want to save the world anymore, seeing as how that didn't work out the last time.
Or maybe not. He doesn't want to save that world, but maybe there is a world he wants to save. A world where he can replace the leaders of that world and be the person that he always wanted to be. This leaves a lot open, which, as it should, it's issue 1 of 12. Do you have any predictions moving forward? Do you have any overbearing opinions? Like when you think of this book, what do you think of?
Well, it's honestly, when I think of this book, I get excited at the possibilities, because Jeff Johns has been known to take classic stories or even just small plot points from a long time ago and turn them into these outrageous, amazing stories like Blackest Night or
right.
The Infinite Crisis.
Right.
So I'm excited for what he's going to do with Doomsday Clock. I'm actually in the lead up to this, in a recent issue of JLA, we were shown that Doctor Manhattan might have actually tampered with time at the very, very, very beginning of the DC universe. You
Wow.
know, that blue hand,
Right.
that very blue hand that no one's supposed to look at. So we were given a little evidence that it definitely is.
He's been playing these
been
games for a
playing
very
these
this is a long game, for a very long time, and
I can't wait to find out exactly what he's done.
I can't wait either. And even with the imagery that they've shown, we're gonna get the confrontation. We're gonna get Superman and Dr. Manhattan. Now it may not be a versus situation. They may not be punching one another, but
I don't think Superman would want to do that.
Right. I mean, could he comprehend the kind of being that John is in this situation? The kind of being that Dr. Manhattan is.
It's the ultimate optimist and the ultimate pessimist having a debate.
Yeah,
which is interesting in itself.
Right.
So, yeah.
But in the vein of things like Batman v Superman, I can't help but think that there's going to be a underlying threat that both of them are going to have to face off against.
Honestly, I kind of hope I kind of hope it's not. But if it is, it would probably be Ozymandias, right? He's known to be a dick.
That's true. But I wonder what kind of threat Ozymandias can amass that would be a challenge for a team of Dr. Manhattan and Superman.
We did get that one cover with Lex Luthor and Ozymandias.
That's true. And those two minds together,
oh my god,
they can do some despicable things. I guess the last thing I want to discuss, as far as Doomsday Clock is concerned, is the original Watchmen series had a very definitive statement to make about comic books, about the heroes, about government, about overreach, about all those things. Do you think that this book is going to, and do you think it has the responsibility that it has to make commentary on the superhero mythos, basically like leave the Watchmen better than they got them when they started the Doomsday Clock?
I think if anybody can do it, it's Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. But I think that at least we've been told that this story is going to be a response to what Watchmen was saying all those years ago, with that story about superheroes and their psyche and everything.
Right.
And whether these stories need to be dark or whether these heroes need to go down these paths. Well, this story is actually going to be the response to that, which is another thing I'm looking forward to, seeing how Jeff Johns responds to that, because he was actually, he was picking those books up off the shelf. I read it retrospectively. Everyone told me it was the greatest thing on the world, and then I read it and I'm like, oh yeah, it is.
Right.
He got to read it while I was on the shelf. If anybody's perspective counts, it's someone like him. And
he can probably tell the story of the middle of that, right? Because one could argue that Watchmen and the DCEU, the DCEU films signify the darkest of the superhero genre, whereas the comics and the animated shows may signify the light, but there is a middle.
Yes.
And maybe that's what it's about getting back to with this whole rebirth initiative.
Well, I think it's actually kind of a, because, Jeff Johns does a metatextual story. He does a metatextual story. So it's like the Watchmen have infected the DC universe with their darkness. And
makes sense.
And in reality,
and pessimism.
They have really infected comics.
Right.
That pessimism and that darkness, because a lot of these, Alan Moore has a very large mind, and when he put these ideas to use, he used a dark story in a dark setting, but he had other stories he was trying to tell. You see, a lot of the creators that came after Alan Moore would try to wrap their minds around that story, but all they would get out of it was that it was good because it was dark, or because people died, and and they took that into their stories, and they created fans of that, and it's basically Watchmen infected comics,
right?
Darkness. So
no, it's true. Think of the success of Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and what it did to those comics. Everything had to now be black and bleak. And listen, if anything, comics is a course correcting medium, because look at the things like Kingdom Come and how it went about to say that not every hero had to be like Spawn and Deadpool, where it's bullets and just gore, and we need those. Don't get it twisted. The 90s was full of, right, everyone had spikes and muscles and
pouches everywhere.
Yeah, and bullets, and that's all it is. Cybernetic limbs, and it's a lot. But there is a middle, and I think DC with Kingdom Come, and now with Doomsday Clock can can do that, can get us back to that middle.
I think they can definitely bring us back to that middle. If you've noticed, ever since Rebirth, the DC comics have, well, they've been great. Not to mention that, but they've been infused with this new hope and optimism, and there's just a brightness about it. And I would love to see Jeff Johns tell us, how we got to this now. How did we get rid of this infection? Dr. Manhattan slowly infecting us for the last 30 years, doing whatever he does.
Oh, exactly, exactly. And, with this new rebranding and this new system of trying to bring more hope into DC Comics in general, it's quite ironic that the next thing we're going to tackle is probably the darkest story we've heard in DC's history.
A story originally titled Dark Crisis.
Which I mean, even the they're being very particular with all their branding with this story here. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dark Crisis was going to be its name, and that is Dark Knight's Metal, which has gone from issues 1 to 3. We're going to sit here and talk about some of its tie-ins, where we think it's going, where it has gone, and just basically its effect on the DC EU.
Now, this story it's enjoyable on its own, for sure, as a lot of Scott Snyder stories are. But it's a lot more enjoyable if you were a fan of Scott Snyder's run on Batman during the New 52.
I actually jumped in on Zack Snyder's run. I had heard a lot about the Court of Owls, and the idea on the face of it just sounded so interesting. Like we said, again, people adding to the mythos is so important to these things. There are so many tools to play with in the tool chest of these superstars or these comic book characters that it seems like some creators go to the same well way too many times.
Yes.
And for Jeff Johnson, well, I was just talking, I have great creators stuck in my mouth. With it's not Scott Snyder making Gotham City a character in the New 52 was great. We saw how that worked in Dark Knight Trilogy. How important it was to have Gotham at the center of all this. And so that's what we're talking about, just adding to the mythos. And guess what? This, if you are a Batman fan, adds to the mythos.
Oh boy, does it!
Whoa! How do you feel about this whole Connor Hall inclusion?
Carter Hall.
Carter Hall.
Oh my God! It was I was like, I was happy with the idea of all the Immortals working together. Like,
right.
Ra's al Ghul,
that was
Savage,
cool to have people at the round table.
All that at the round table.
The round table of immortality, basically.
These Immortals really should be talking to each other at least once every 100 years, right? Let's get our shit together. Well, so I thought that was really cool. But then, it gets even cooler where, well, I'm sure like by now we've all read Metal #1 at least,
right.
And you eventually find out that his grandson Daniel Hall, the new Dream.
Right.
This is going to be part of the story. So it was like, whoa, okay.
Bringing Sandman elements.
I'm all up in this. I was very happy about that.
It's crazy. There's always been a conscious effort to keep Hawkman afloat.
Yeah, but
in DC. And how do you feel about that character?
Okay, I feel like Hawkman on its own, it's Hawkman, but when you take
I get Birdman vibes from Birdman,
attorney at law. Well, when you get the right creator on a Hawkman book, James Robinson's Hawkman, oh my God. So then you read stories like that, and it's like, well, Hawkman's one of my favorite characters. But of course, because James Robinson made him awesome.
But if people don't continue in that vein, if people don't pay homage to what that creater did, then we're right back to the bottom with he just has a big helmet with those weird eyes on it and
the stupid wings that he puts on.
Yeah. Terrible. But they seem to have been rooting a lot of this story with him being immortal. He saw the tribes. The beginning of civilization,
Tribes, which is actually a very, very fun callback to Grant Morrison's run on Batman, because Scott Snyder's run on Batman almost completely ignored Grant Morrison's run, and that pissed me off to no end. So now seeing Metal and bring everything around and seeing how Scott was actually going to be calling back to that, which he ignored this entire time, I'm like, okay, I'll forgive you.
Well, that was a journey that we all went on when Bruce went back into time, and things like that Scott Snyder chose to call back to. With this story, and you start to wonder, like, was it worth that entire year of not having Batman and him fighting through time and him becoming a pirate and the Judas tribe, like you were saying from before.
I think it'll always be worth it because we got to see Dick as Batman for a year.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
Should have stood lost in time, Bruce.
But from the beginning of this story, one thing is certain: Batman is terrified.
Oh Yes.
Absolutely terrified. There seems to be something he doesn't 100% understand or doesn't 100% know how to combat, and it is that this metal, this idea that there are legendary metals in DC, and that through a process called the mantling, could enable the gateway, which in this case happens to be Bruce Wayne, could enable the gateway to be opened and let out Barbatos, the dark bat demon of the multiverse. So, it starts off automatically with Bruce trying to take the last bit of metal that he can find, and then this chase for finding Batman I thought was amazing.
It should be pointed out that this Batman is actually terrified. He is making mistakes. He is running. He's doing things. The League is trying to figure out what's wrong with him. It was fun to see.
To tell you the truth, that's actually one of my favorite parts of Batman, is that we know when he's calm, cool, and collected. We've seen that 100% because I'm Batman. But what happens when that stops working?
Yes,
that's a lot more compelling to see him, fall apart at the seams. And while we don't know why he's afraid, in the future we end up kind of finding, like, a lot of the stuff they show in these issues is nightmare fuel. A lot of the concepts that they have, that we'll get to in a bit, but you had Batman with baby Darkseid,
throwing up the little devil horns.
The devil horns.
I thought that was the cutest thing in the universe. I'm sorry.
I guess he just like picked them up from Grail, who've been
baby.
Yeah, he just
baby Darkseid.
Like, you won't miss this. I'll bring him back.
She's like making the Darkseid bottle in the kitchen, and she comes back. And
honey, I made breakfast. Oh no,
the Darkseid crib is empty.
The baby is gone. My father, right? My father's last son is gone, but has baby Darkseid. His plan, which is kind of ridiculous, is to use the Omega Beam and the Omega Sanction to go back through time, so that there is no Batman to be a gateway for, and therefore there is no Barbatos. Am I saying that right? Barbatos?
Yes.
I feel like the bat needs to be emphasized. Barbatos.
Barbatos, because if not, it just sounds like that country Rihanna's from.
Exactly, and I don't think Batman has any beef with Rihanna, so that wouldn't even make any sense. But Barbatos does end up having the mantling take place. The Court of Owls finds Batman. They trick him into going into the wrong tomb, and are able to use the mantling effects to open up the gateway.
Which actually, I think there were 7 different metals that they had to collect.
Yes, you had Dionysium,
magnesium. There were like 6 that they had already collected, and then they found one.
The greatest
metal. The great. I want to see what it looks
on
like
the
on the periodic
table.
It's gotta have a little bat on it because it's called Batmanium.
Yes, Batmanium, and they even, and as silly as it sounds on the face of it, they talked about Batmanium in the New 52.
They explained it, and they explained how it came to be and why it even has this silly name. So it's like, for me, it makes perfect logical sense. If you don't understand it, I understand why.
But it's there, and that's why I said, like, DC has been very rewarding lately. All of this seems to be huge apology letters, but not even apology letters. I think that they are just trying to build that goodwill. And this is how you do it, by telling people that everything that you've seen and read exists.
This is definitely how you do it. I don't want to say that, I don't like to throw fuel on the Marvel versus DC fire, because I love all comics. I want everybody to succeed so that I can have more stories to read.
Stories are good.
But they definitely stole me over from the House of Marvel. For the last 2 years, I have just been living in the DC universe, and their stories are so rewarding. They take you back. They help you know that you did not waste your time. 10 years.
DC is the place to be. And you have this story here, which, like I said again, puts Batman in a position that he normally isn't in. So you get that aspect, because everything. I love Snyder's run, but that Batman was unstoppable.
Yeah, very self-contained story too. He never played well with anyone else.
No, and they, like, very rarely. And so in this story here, Batman needs his friends to go forward, because turns out that Barbatos does use Bruce Wayne as the gateway, traps Bruce Wayne into the dark multiverse, and we get, which I think is the best part of this story, we get the introduction of the Dark Knights of the multiverse.
Yes,
Batman versions of the the members of the Justice League.
Yeah, his worst nightmares. Dragged out from the dark multiverse, which is actually the dark multiverse. If you don't know, it exists on the other side of the
Yes,
DC
it does
universe.
on the other side of the map. If you have the map of the DC universe, turn it to the back.
Because now there is another map back there. Believe me, it's there. You don't even have to flip it over. Just leave it where you have it.
With the dark multiverse, which means as many Earths are in the regular multiverse or in the dark multiverse, each one with horrifying effects. Like I said, all nightmare fuel, the very worst that Batman has to, can think up. And what was your favorite? I mean, all these guys got one shots. They all got origin stories. What was your favorite Dark Knight of the multiverse?
Well, but before I talked about that, I just wanted to say the dark multiverse. I actually really like the concept of it, where these worlds only exist because they are the fears and the nightmares of people that exist in the regular multiverse. So once they overcome these fears, these worlds vanish, and they are fully aware of it, and it hurts them.
Yes.
So these Dark Knights now are pissed off. We're underbelly. We're Scourge. We're nothing. We're waste. And
each one of them are refugees of their Earth.
Refugees of their Earth. Their Earths are gone.
They're negative, right? Because all of them were like from Earth -10 or Earth -28. They have no home. But they are fully ready to make Earth 0 their home.
Yeah. So these Dark Knights, they're actually straight from Batman's nightmares, like we were saying. We've got one for each member of the League, and my favorite had to be, the Batman who laughs. I know that's a cliche answer right now. Everyone's gonna say the Batman who laughs, but
why do things gotta be cliche if everyone can agree, right?
Everyone's gonna agree. I don't mind. I'm gonna jump right in there too. I'm on the bandwagon. I'm driving that shit.
I like the Batman who laughs. I'm a fan of the Dawnbreakers, who's the Green Lantern's the Green Lantern analog. I'm a fan of his origin, because I do believe that Bruce has super will. If anything, he has that. He does have that willpower, and his ability to jailbreak that lantern ring and then use it for murder was amazing. I like the twist at the end of The Merciless, when you find out that Diana tried to take the helmet from Bruce, the helmet of Ares from Bruce, and he kind of handled her. Handled her. I thought that was great. But yeah, we got all these guys here. Red Death had a great story.
Red Death was another great story.
Which is the Flash version of Batman, and basically Batman pulls the Speed Force out of Barry Allen by repurposing the Cosmic Treadmill and the Batmobile to pull the Speed Force out of Barry Allen, and now there's this weird kind of Jekyll and Hyde
this double
amalgamation
existence type thing going on.
And their speech bubbles are all cool because they're like scratchy and double of everything. So I thought that was real cool. So yeah, you got the Merciless, you got the Dawnbreaker, you got the Red Death, and then you got the Drowned, which is probably my least favorite. Did you find a soft spot for Bryce Wayne, the female version of Bruce Wayne?
I did think that it was pretty cool that it was Earth -11, because Earth 11 is the universe where all the heroes are gender bent.
This is true.
So, but the story definitely was the weakest out of all 7, and I'm a big guy. I'm a big story guy. Like,
right.
I would like your character if your story's good. That's all. So that was definitely in the bottom of my list.
We have the Devastator, which is a Doomsday version of Batman, which Batman injects himself with the Doomsday virus to stop Superman, and things do not go.
That was actually pretty high on my list, seeing that reimagined version of the Batman v Superman fight.
Yeah,
Bruce has the staff, but he gets his arm all lasered off.
Exactly, but you with someone with as many contingency plans as he has, you got to think that this Doomsday Serum existed, or
I mean that this is basically confirmation that he has a Doomsday Serum, because
but he has not taken it.
But it has never used it.
Okay.
And hopefully he never has to, because that is one ugly sumbitch.
No, yeah, we do not need to see the Devastator on this Earth. We have the Murder Machine, which I think has the worst name.
The Murder Machine.
I'm not a real
Something
big fan
straight
of
out of the 70s.
Yeah, I'm not really big on the Murder Machine's name, but basically he comes with a entire AI family of Alfreds that are constantly asking, "Are you okay, sir? How are you doing, sir?" And all this kind of stuff.
It's actually really creepy.
Yeah, and I like this. I like his stuff, and he actually, I think, does a lot better when he's interacting with Cyborg, like when they're trying to pull out something from him. We'll get to that in a bit, but then, like you said, you have the Batman Who Laughs, who we just got his story. He was the last one to get a one shot. How did you think about the explanation of the Batman Who Laughs and why he is how he is. Basically, what happens in that story is that Joker has a contingency plan if he's ever killed. The person who kills him will become the next Joker because a gas will emit from a tooth from his tooth that will cause him to have the same debilitating effects of falling into the acid and all that madness.
I actually loved that story. It was pretty sick. It's a pretty sick story. It's dark, very dark. But one of the things I liked about that story was that even though Bruce was losing his mind, he was still Bruce. He is still as sick-minded, and he's always got a contingency plan. He's still got the mental capacity to do things that normal people can't do. He's just evil now. He's completely lost it.
None of these guys have sympathy. None of these guys have any kind of qualms with just mass murder, and that's one of the things that Batman has for years stood against. So seeing him go so quick to try to kill people is, it's very shocking.
It's shocking, but the way it was explained, the Joker virus didn't take effect immediately. It wasn't like gas, poof, ha ha ha.
That's
everyone's dead. It took like a month of his costume slowly changing. He had this cool purple and yellow bat costume on.
Yeah, his skin's kind of getting lighter.
It was a slow progression. Oh my god, the way he just handled Superman and his family.
Oh my god, yeah,
sick.
Out of control. Black kryptonite is the way he gave him.
He did give him black kryptonite, and then he made him kill his own
he said the effects of this will cause you to rip your family to shreds, and that's exactly what he does. You see these weird, he's bleeding from his eyes, these weird panels of the Justice League being torn to shreds. Even when Barbado shows up in the regular multiverse, the sunken faces of Wonder Woman and Superman,
it's nasty zombiness.
Well, like I said, all of this is nightmare fuel, but in the same sense, this had to have been exciting for the artists, right? Who have been drawing the same, and Grant Capullo comes from the House of Spawn.
Yes.
And so this is almost all out of Spawn, and he had to have been tired of drawing square jaws and barrel chests.
I think that's why he gave Bruce the pointy chin.
Yeah, he really. I love Greg Capullo's art. I really think that he is, he did what Neil Adams did for this generation of Batman fans, the newest generation of Batman fans.
His art is actually so distinct that it was hard for me to read Snyder's Batman and then connect it to the other works.
Right, exactly.
At the same time.
Exactly. But you have all these guys now with no Earths. And what are they going to do? They're going to do exactly what they always do with these kind of series, where they pit each one against the person that they are representing, or their version, their doppelganger, so to speak. So each one of these Batmen have concocted their own Bat caves, right? So there's all these Batmen of the Dark Multiverse, all with dark Bat caves, and have trapped each member of the Justice League in these caves, all except for Batman, who's trapped in the Dark Multiverse, Superman, who, in trying to find out where Batman is trapped in the Dark Multiverse.
So naive. It's so funny watching him just be like, "I love you, Bruce. Where are you, man?"
He was like, Diana, no, he told me that thing. Remember that thing we said? We had a little code back in the day.
He's having this dream, and in the dream, Damian and John are playing the 1960s Batman theme song.
Yeah, everyone's just hanging out. The picnic.
And as it turns out, Clark and Diana, that's the D and the C that Bruce had actually told Clark was their secret message. If he was ever in trouble, he'd send him a secret message with a D and a C in it.
Right.
But as it turns out, the message Bruce was sending him is actually in reverse.
Yeah.
Don't come get me.
Do not come get me.
The message is in the first two notes of Damian and John's song. The note is a C and a D.
Out of control. So he was sending a message. Superman heard what he wanted to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they do some kind of mumbo jumbo about sending Superman to the Dark Multiverse. That seemed a little bit.
He used the Spire from the Crisis Stories. I don't know if you remember the Anti-Monitor using his shadow people to create the giant multiversal.
These tuning fork things.
And they used that to go into the Dark Multiverse, and then Batman's there.
It's like, you idiot!
You freaking idiot!
I told them they'd never win as long as they didn't catch Superman. He's the smartest mind of the generation. He would never show up here, ever, and then you showed up.
It's like 2 minutes ago, I was building you up!
and probably, I think what the scariest part about this is what happens, what we're told happens in the Dark Multiverse, what we see a little bit more in Batman Lost issue 1, which is Superman and Batman are reliving nightmares over
Yes.
and over and over again, instances in which they are being killed or dying. I really like that Batman Lost issue.
With people losing their lives, losing loved ones.
I really liked the Batman Lost issue because you have Batman as a grandfather almost, and Barbatos playing his niece or granddaughter, and it's kind of every time Bruce is saying like, "Oh no, this isn't right. Oh no, this isn't how this went."
Don't worry,
Barbatos, yeah, it's just like, "Nah, don't worry. Listen, you ain't got nothing to worry about with that." And how scary is that? Like that you can keep being pulled deeper, and they say that constantly, right? Barbados is saying, "I'm gonna get you, and when I get you, there's not gonna be any light. I'm gonna keep pulling and pulling you deeper and deeper."
Representative of your own fears.
Now I have a because remember they have the bird that flew into the, or was it the bat that flew into the window?
Yeah,
that is Barbatos.
that is Barbados.
That has now been said that the bat that flew in the, well, Father, I shall become a bat. That all that stuff is Barbatos had been orchestrating this entire thing.
You knew
from the
that
get.
couldn't be a coincidence.
It was a cool coincidence in the beginning, right? When we first heard that, I was like, "Oh wow, random bat!" Like, and then you think like, "Oh, so if it would have been a pigeon, you would have been like, oh, I will become a pigeon, Father."
But all this comes from Bruce's original journey through time, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where Barbatos followed him through time.
Yeah.
You know, so he has a bone to pick with this with Mr. Wayne. But
I think sorry, but didn't Grant Morrison actually come back to DC to work with Scott Snyder on Batman Lost?
I gotta double check
Does he
that.
have a credit? Did he get credited?
If that happens, if that's the case, then that'd be absolutely awesome because it's so much a love letter to Batman, as we've said everything else is, where it deals with his first story ever, his first issue of his first story ever. I mean, look, you got a list of names there. I'm not sure if Morrison's on there, but
I remember there was this big story out there. Bleeding Cool was all hype about it. Oh, Morrison's back, and then when I read it, it's like, oh, well, he's only helping.
And I mean, I like, it does have the Morrison touch. That there's a panel that starts off the entire comic in which Bruce looks straight into the straight at the reader. Bruce is looking right at the reader, and that's right out of Grant Morrison's Multiversity. Is it Multiversity? Multiplicity?
Multiversity, yeah.
Multiversity?
I can see you.
Yeah, exactly. And how that's kind of scary for us, the reader, because we've been almost this voyeur looking at these people without them knowing that we're looking at these people, kind of thing. So to have Bruce to be like, "No, I know you're there.
Just calling me out.
Stop looking at me.
Now I feel like a creep."
Yeah, exactly. But the bat goes into the window. You heard there's like this throwaway line about how birds and bats see differently. They can't see the angles on the windows. There's something else
back to the war between the bird tribes and the bat tribes.
And the bird and bat tribes. So I'm going to use both of those to come up with a little bit of speculation. The next thing seemingly to come in this Batman Lost thing seems to be Hawkman Found. And with this birds and bat thing, is there a possibility that Hawkman will be able to find the way out that Bruce can't? Remember we were talking about those angles? A bat and a bird see different angles. They can't see through the window. Could not see maybe the window. There's a lot here that I have to unpack, but that's basically the gist of what I'm trying to say. That Hawkman's going to be the man to save Batman.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I actually hadn't thought of that while reading because I keep thinking back to Morrison's run.
Right.
So I keep thinking of the tribes, but I hadn't put together how they're talking about how Batman and Hawkman are going to need each other here.
You're right. The bird and the bat are going to ultimately need each other to take down Barbatos. And another thing I want to mention about this series is Forging and Casting, the two books that came out prior to Metal, were heavy. Like, they had a lot of expository information, things that you had to remember.
Lots of Easter
eggs. And with the way that Snyder writes, you want these things in your pocket. Like, these things that you think are throwaway are the breadcrumbs that are going to lead to the next story.
Yes.
And so that's why I feel that they did such a long paint. Because this Batman Lost issue could have been 2 or 3 pages in any of the Metal tie-ins to tell you what Batman's dealing with.
Yeah, the formatting on this story is almost as if he has too much story to fit in the 8 issues that they gave him. So,
right.
It's like
it almost behooves him to have a whole dark multiverse on its own.
There you go.
To do all that. But Batman is stuck. Superman is stuck. The only people who seem to be left are the people of the Gotham Resistance, because Gotham's The Batman Who Laughs has given certain members of the Gotham Rogues Gallery superpowered cars that allow them to their deepest desires to be fulfilled. Riddler builds an entire labyrinth. Um, you have Mr. Freeze kind of in a Sub-Zero, so like where he can actually command ice with his hands and has these ice golems that can fight. You have Poison Ivy and her menagerie of evil human eating plants.
Challenger Mountain.
You have Challenger Mountain. Basically Challenger Mountain sits in the middle of this entire thing, which is a callback to
yes,
the Challengers, and that's absolutely awesome. But you have smatterings of heroes, half of the Suicide Squad, some of the Titans. Everyone who's left is actively trying to fight. When we see Detective Chimp,
oh, yes.
Detective Chimp, is also there. When we see these guys at the bar, everyone seems to have like 10 years put on them.
Oh,
they're
my
stressed
goodness.
out.
You mentioned the Oblivion Bar. Now, the Oblivion Bar was such another example of DC being rewarding to its readers. We have not seen the Oblivion Bar in like 10 years.
There you go.
We have not seen this since Infinite Crisis, and then to see what they do to it afterwards.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Heartbreaking.
It was. There's been a bunch of heartbreaking stuff. We'll be able to get into that, but definitely those callbacks, definitely rewarding those readers. This has been a conscious effort moving forward with DC, and you know what, man? If they're gonna keep doing it, I'll keep staying. You understand? You keep serving me dessert. I'm not leaving. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
That's all that it's gonna be. But we're about halfway through the story. So many tie-ins. Like I said, you have members of the Gotham Resistance like Nightwing and Damian and Arrow. They figured out that if they can amass weapons tipped with the metal, any of the metals that have the effects of the mantling, that they could ultimately take out these members of the Dark Multiverse. So we have the enemy. We have the means to stop the enemy. We just need to get our team back. We got to get Bruce back. We got to get Superman back. And we have to get the right tools in the right hands of the right people to stop the members of these multiverses. But what do you think is going to be, is going to come about this? Do you think that this story...
one of the things we actually forgot to mention was that in all of these Dark Knights one-shots, Dr. Fate was collecting a team.
He was.
Snatching them away from danger just in time. Green Lantern, Flash, Cyborg, I want to say Wonder Woman. There were a couple others that Dr. Fate was assembling. So
right before instant death, almost.
Yes.
He would show up and grab these guys up. Then is it Lois who's walking around as a Doomsday?
Is
an entire Doomsday virus has been released
right,
on Metropolis.
Yes.
We have the Doomsday version of Lois Lane stomping around Metropolis. Like, things are bleak in this story. Red Death is creating some sort of aura around it. If you touch it, you automatically die. A bunch of stuff is going on, and hope does seem to be lost. But like I said, we have the weapons that we need to amass. The Justice League has escaped. They are currently in, I want to say, hypertime. Are they in hypertime right now?
Well, I think that what happened was some of them were all captured. Cyborg was captured, and then it turns out the mother box inside of him, this is an obvious thing we all should have thought of a long time ago. It's powered by Element X. So
exactly.
Cyborg would also be powered by Element X. So now he's figured out how to use the Element X to traverse the multiverse and hypertime, which is where they are now.
Which seems pretty cut and dry, right? Like that use Element X to do it. But there was a little bit of a struggle in this decision because the initial decision was let this mother box take more control.
Yes.
And that's something that frightens Vic because, I mean, it's always man or machine, right, with him. And to allow this thing to completely overhaul everything that he knows is a little bit scary to the former football player.
And it hasn't been confirmed yet, but I've got a small feeling that whenever he uses this Element X, he's going to be giving up a little bit more of his control. Thankfully, we get a bit of a reunion of sorts where Cyborg is struggling with whether or not to give more of himself up, and he hears a friendly voice. I'm here for you. Don't do it. you can be yourself.
At the time, I'm thinking, who could this be? Is it like a father figure? Is it his dad? Is it somebody from his past? Is it another random cameo that we're gonna get from 1963,
exactly.
where Cyborg has he has an imp that hangs out with him and likes to talk to him, and no, it ends up being.
We definitely ended up getting back a major part of Cyborg's life, which is Raven.
Yes,
and the way they were talking to each other with the air of familiarity, in that there might have been a Teen Titans now in continuity
where Cyborg was on it.
Definitely on the team, and that just made my heart feel all warm and tickly.
And it just felt right. It's one of those things that you know the history of these characters, and when they put them in this position, it just feels right. The same way every time you put Dick Grayson with Damian Wayne, that it just gels because they were a team, so that makes 100% sense. And what I guess what I gotta ask is, now that the team is out in the multiverse, right? They're traversing the multiverse with Cyborg 1,000,000.
That's what he's calling himself, right? Cyborg 1,000,000.
Cyborg, new branding on Cyborg 1,000,000, and they're traversing the multiverse. They are going to be hunted down by the Dark Knights of the multiverse. The next installment seems to be the Wild Hunt, where the Dark Knights will be seemingly looking for the members of the League that have split across various locations of the multiverse to find the metals that are going to be needed to destroy the Dark Knights.
I'm actually really interested in how they're going to collect this in trade paperback, because while we're only up to Metal issue 4, we've had about, let's say, 15 or 16 different issues of Metal that are not just throwaway tie-ins.
Right. Well, the one-shots are 6 one-shots?
It's 6 one-shots.
And that's just on the Dark Knights of the multiverse.
Yeah.
There's 2 prequel books, The Forging and the Casting. That's 8.
2 separate crossover tie-ins.
Yep, Bats Out of Hell and Gotham Resistance,
4 issues each.
And this Batman Lost title.
And Batman Lost now.
So there is a lot. This is gonna be, and I mean, listen, there's very few creators that get a story that stretches as far as this does. I can't blame the guys for stretching his hands out. Like I can't blame him for getting as much story out of this as possible, because what's worse is when you get these stories and the tie-ins seem forced.
Yes.
Like the characters are not really in the midst of what's going on. They're kind of on the outskirts, so we'll see what we can get them to do.
Everybody hates a pointless tie-in.
Exactly, but this shows how much the entire DC universe is enveloped into this. Something that hopefully we see in Doomsday Clock as well. Hopefully we see that Doomsday Clock and the effects of it affect the entire DC universe.
I actually noticed a bunch of people online, asking, how could Doomsday Clock and all this Dr. Manhattan stuff be happening at the same time as DC Metal? And the answer to that, which I think was mentioned once, but it hasn't been mentioned in story yet, is that Doomsday Clock is actually 1 year ahead of the DC universe, which means that it's a year ahead of DC Metal. So by the time Doomsday Clock ends, there's most likely going to be this huge universe-changing ramifications that are going to affect DC line-wide.
Well, and with these two books are no slouch. They're no slouches, and they are going to have permanent effects moving on to the DC multiverse going forward. This creation of the Dark Multiverse does a lot, but I guess now is a good time to talk about a little bit of the speculation that's been going around that one of the members of the Dark Knights of the Multiverse may be hanging on past Dark Knight's metal, and that is the Batman Who Laughs, your favorite Batman.
I love it.
Is there room for seemingly a second Joker in Batman's thing, or am I cutting the character too short?
Is there room for another Batman rogue?
Yes, that's true. That can be argued.
At the same time, he could be a Superman villain. I don't know where they're gonna go with this, and hopefully he isn't just another Arkham Asylum resident,
right?
Hopefully,
and it's also not easy to say that name constantly. Like, is Bruce gonna call him the Batman Who Laughs? Hey, Batman Who Laughs. Well, we locked away the Batman Who Laughs.
Have they called him that in story? Like, has he, other than him calling himself that?
No,
right? No, somebody will come up with a name for him.
And they all got really good on that branding early. I remember the Dawnbreaker was like, I'm the Dawnbreaker, and I was like, that works. Yeah, you good. I mean, hey, people gotta know. People got get that logo out there, man.
Get that logo out there.
People gotta know. But with these two comics, DC is swinging for the fences, but they still need to be able to do that on the film side of things. In maybe our next installment of Major Issues, we'll go forward with a full-on Justice League review, but I realize that that's going to take its own shape
Yeah,
and
Justice
form.
League has major issues.
It does. It has major issues. And but man, it has been a blast talking about these two books. It's been an exciting time to be a comic fan in general.
Yes.
I'm maybe just a DC fan, but it's been kind of.
If you like rehashed stories, Marvel's the place to be right now. So
if you like, it was all in the Cosmic Cube stories.
It was Kobach.
It was all Kobach. If you like that, then that's there for you.
Don't get us wrong though. I love Marvel. I just want to see them do better right now. Like they're on fire with their films, but in the comic world, it's like.
Yeah, they only seem to care about Spider-Man in the comic world for some strange reason.
Get
But
it together.
yeah, but if that's what you like, if you like the Marvel, you like the DC, if you like comics, this is the place to be. And if you like what we do, there's various places where you can find the stuff that we do. You can go to facebook.com/comicbookclick, Instagram @comicbookclick, or use the hashtag comicbookclick to talk about the newest, hottest, and latest and greatest things to come to comic books and comic book media. With Major Issues out now, we'll be able to do deep dives into comic book stories, into TV shows, casting news, comic news, all kinds of stuff like that. And I can't be any more excited than I am now, except for when Doomsday Clock issue 2 comes out, and then we'll be sitting here.
December 27th.
There you
I'm
go.
going to go freeze myself until then.
And we'll be put on ice until then, but make sure that you guys aren't. Make sure that you guys are following all things Comic Book Click so you can find out the news of when these episodes are trying to drop. Again, this is a brand new venture, and we thank all of you guys for being alongside for the ride. This has been a Doomsday Clock and Dark Knight Metal and the tie-in review and recap. My name is George Serrano, a.k.a. The Don.
This is Jonathan Escudero, a.k.a. Yogi.
And this has been an episode of Major Issues.
We got major issues.
We got major issues, and you, yes you, are worthy.